What do a tick and the Eiffel Tower have in common?
What?
They're both parasites.
What started as a Saturday morning coffee date turned into a podcast where we chat about things like faith, family, finances, and so much more.
In a world that is encouraging you to live your truth and to follow your heart, we want to encourage you to live devoted to the truth.
The Bible has a lot to say about how to live a victorious Christian life, and we want to share practical insight in how to apply those truths to your life as we endeavor to apply them to our own lives as well.
If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a review and share these episodes with your friends so that you can help them live this devoted life too. Welcome to another episode of This Devoted Life podcast.
All right. I actually have a story from this morning that is fresh in my mind that I wanted to share. So
lay it on us.
All right. Well, it actually, it goes along with our most recent podcast with the vision and just having a vision in life. Well, this morning I was working out, and it's not a humble brag. I do work out, every morning or most mornings, just more for longevity. So it's not like I'm gonna, bulk up and get huge or whatever. But I was having a good workout, and all of a sudden I think I was doing reverse lunges, and it was leg day, and I was getting tired a little bit, and I was in the middle of doing an exercise, and all of a sudden I started getting like wobbly, and each rep I got more and more unstable, and I actually had to stop and kind of catch my balance and
That must
kind
have
of
been
just
quite the leg day.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I could barely walk up the stairs afterwards, but so I then just kind of regained my balance and went back into the exercise, and I don't know, like I just had this little like epiphany where because I had to stop and I was unstable and unbalanced, I had to stop, regain my composure, and then I focused visually on one spot in front of me to basically have my balance throughout the whole exercise. And that's when that epiphany happened where I'm like, man, that's a pretty good metaphor for life. It's like we go through life, and kind of our last podcast, we have a vision of what we need to do, but we might get distracted. We might get lazy, run down, tired. Yeah, all the different things that can kind of throw us off in life. But then we start losing our balance, and we become way out of balance in our daily walk, whether it's spiritually or in your job, in your workplace, or whatever. And it's because you lost focus. So sometimes in life, we just need to, if we feel like things are starting to get out of whack and things are unbalanced in our life, stop, you reassess things, and then get refocused on what you need to do, and then move forward. And I thought, that's actually a pretty good analogy. Like I said, a little metaphor, and it just happened right there while I was working out this morning.
That's awesome. So, and I haven't even told you this. So in my mom's Bible study that I was at this morning, it was on priorities.
Really?
Yeah, and keeping focus on what is important. So there was a lady who, we watched a video, and she kind of gave like a little talk, but she was talking about the story of Mary and Martha, and how Martha was busy doing all of the things, and Jesus was like, Martha, Martha, you are worried about many things. Like Mary has chosen the good portion, right? And so often, like when we watch that or listen to that story, we're either like, are we a Mary or are we a Martha? But we actually miss the point of the story. The point of the story is that Jesus is the center of it, not Mary or Martha.
Sure.
In the way that it's actually put, like Jesus is the host. He's the one who is speaking and engaging, and he's the bread of life. It wasn't what Martha had to give or Mary had to give, but it was Christ. Right. And so it was kind of the focus, the vision, where should Martha's focus had been, or should it have been, was on Christ. And he's actually the center of that story. So,
awesome. There you go. Yeah,
I just love it when things
dovetails together.
Ties together. Well, I was thinking about that too when you were talking about that. Is I love when we do have these conversations. There are things that, as you go about your day, that you, like, God gives you just a little something more to reaffirm what
Right.
you've been talking about, or maybe something that you need to learn. It's kind of like our son the other day. We were doing a Bible reading, and he's like, "This is the third time this week I have heard this passage of
That's awesome.
scripture." And I
Yeah.
was like, well, first of all, I'm glad that you noticed
hmm
and that you were paying attention, but maybe something that God had something for you in
Sure.
that,
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I had actually totally forgotten that this morning was your mom's Bible study group, because I think I was texting you about some lunch or something like
You
that. I'm
were.
like, why is she not responding? So it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. Well, I made it home safely. So,
There you go. Yep. Yeah. No, that's awesome. So yeah, hopefully that was a good little useful tidbit, and something that kind of segues into our topic for today.
yeah. So we wanted to talk today about something that we had been discussing in our Sunday school class recently. We were going through the story of Daniel
Yep.
and his friends being taken into captivity in Babylon. And really, we were just kind of staying in Daniel 1, and just the type of boys that these, I mean, they were young men, but I mean,
Yeah.
they could have been as young as, what were they saying, like 12, 13, 14 years old. Like, they were not men yet.
Yeah, it's not like they were, 30, 40-year-olds that were, taken captive.
Yeah.
They were
But
brought before the king.
they
Yeah.
were literally like uprooted out of their families, and they made good and wise decisions, even though they had been removed from their homes and placed into massive temptation, really, because
Yeah.
I mean, they were literally brought into the king's palace, and they were having all of these tempting things laid before them.
Right.
They probably had never seen food that, delicious
Yeah,
or
and
whatever.
it had been offered to idols and all
Yeah.
those things. And yeah, and not only was it like tempting things and temptations there,
Mhm.
they were literally being forced and mandated to do these things.
Yes.
So it wasn't like, oh, here's your enticement. It's like, here's what you are going to do, and blah
Yeah.
blah blah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So-
One thing that I'll also interject here, and maybe you were gonna get into it, but I'll just kind of say it now. When it's like the Bible doesn't really talk about their parents
Mm-mm.
at all, but we can kind of infer from this text that their parents must have done a very good job, or their community, or that group of people, because they literally were, again, ripped from their families
Mhm.
and ripped from their homeland, put in a new place in the Babylonian Empire. Like, again, this is the greatest empire of that era in history, and yet they were disciplined enough
Mhm.
to obey that law, the Hebrew law.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's kind
very
of like what
interesting.
you hope for your children,
Yeah.
that one day they leave, they cling to what they have been taught,
Yep.
hopefully that we've been teaching them biblical principles. And then these young men were put to test at a young age. Like, are you going to stand for me?
Sure.
And Daniel 1:4 says that it was children in whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom and cunning and in knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. And so I take that verse, and you can infer
Mhm.
all of the training that they had gone through before ever even being brought before the king.
Sure.
Like, the king saw something in these men, and they were like, they've been taught.
Yeah, they stood out. I mean, whether they were leaders or, again, just, strong, strapping young
Yeah.
men, or whatever, visually appealing, whatever reason, like you said, they were chosen and kind of brought out of the group.
Yeah.
And that is, even that, I think speaks, I don't know, as Christians, we don't necessarily have to, kind of blend in with whether it's the Christian world or the secular world. We're not supposed to, obviously, but there is a way to stand out in a godly way.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. So the focus of this podcast is actually going to be on Daniel and his friends, and just the importance of choosing godly friends. And so obviously Daniel's parents laid a foundation for him, that when he was ripped from his family, thrown before the king's court, and he sought out friends that would encourage him. You know, having good godly friends really does strengthen your faith, you know? And so it wasn't just Daniel.
Yep.
He had Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with him as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I honestly don't know this, but did they know each other, or does the Bible say they knew each other prior to, like,
I
in
don't
their
think the
homeland?
Bible actually says whether they knew each other before or not, but that was one thing that, you know, you and I had discussed, that who you are, you usually try to find people who are similar
Yeah.
to you. So
Yep.
even if they did not know each other, they saw like a kinship.
Yep.
They knew that they were wanting to stand together for God in
Yeah.
this situation.
Yeah.
And it seems like, you know, reading through the account, that they really, you know, sought each other out and took comfort, you know, from one another, and really kind of bolstered each other's faith.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't know. I always try to put myself in that place or whatever. And again, this is just conjecture, but, you know, to think about, you know, okay, so did they seek each other out, or were they just literally ripped from their other friends and brought into this kind of, it sounds like an elite group or
Yeah.
whatever, you know, that they were trying to assemble. But then, like, they obviously, you know, were, you know, in their own way conspiring together
Yeah.
immediately. You
Well, it
know,
kind of
it's
makes
like,
you wonder, like, would they have stood as firm in their faith had they not had each other in
Right.
that moment? Did
Yeah.
God, like, give them one another to help bolster each other to
Sure.
do what is right?
yeah,
You know?
yeah. No, it is. It's I mean, it sounds like a very scary time, but also a very fascinating, you know, experience and story in the Bible.
Yeah. And, you know, so they were offered the king's meat. And
Yep.
I love the verse. I think it's Daniel 1:8. I'll actually turn to that real quick, where it says, "But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself." So it started with intentionality. He purposed before even taking a bite of anything that he was going to do what God wanted him
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
So
He made a strong stance, a decision that, and he held himself accountable to carrying that out. So yeah, no, it's pretty impressive.
yeah, it is really neat to see how God, you know, just kind of works all that out. But, you know, Daniel, it also took effort on Daniel's part to stay that
Absolutely.
course.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, like I said, it's, I mean, it's relatively easy and simple to just make a decision, you know, like whether it's, you know, New Year's resolution and you decide to do something, like that's the easy part. You know, some people maybe even struggle with that. Like, what should I do? What should I not do? You know, but it's actually the carrying out of that
Absolutely.
decision or that resolution or whatever you want to call it. That's the impressive part. But so again, that's, you know, good friends strengthen your faith.
Absolutely.
That's a huge strength. You know, again, not that we can't stand alone and, you know, just rely on the word of God. But boy, if you have a good group of friends and, you know, whether they're family members, true friends, whatnot, that makes a huge difference.
Well, we have to have community, and I think that's why God instituted his local church.
Yep.
Is we have to have that iron sharpening iron, you know?
Yeah. Yep. No, I totally agree. Yeah, you're throwing Ephesians and Proverbs in there too.
Yeah. You know, so for those of you who maybe don't know the story of Daniel, so they were offered the king's meat, and the reason they were doing that is because they wanted them to be well nourished, right? But this meat was offered to idols, and they were like, "Nope, God commanded us that we were not to do that." And so Daniel goes to the was it Ashpenaz? I think that was his name.
Yeah, that's a good
And says,
word.
yeah, and says, "Let us eat only vegetables for a certain amount of time, and then come back and look at us and determine whether or not we can continue to eat this diet of only vegetables." And because God had given them favor with this man, he said, "You know what?" He said, "We'll try this for a few days and we'll see what happens."
Yeah.
And at the end of that set time, Ashpenaz took one look at him, and then he was like, "You guys look better than everyone else here." Like their countenance was glowing. They were strong. They were healthy. They weren't weak looking. And because of that, God blessed their faithfulness, and they were able to not defile themselves with the king's meat.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's a few things that kind of pop into my head throughout that. So, first of all, I do struggle with this passage just a little bit because
You like your meat.
Yeah, it seems like there's some vegetarianism going on around here. I need my protein, but no, yeah, just when I read that, kind of years and years and years ago, and thought of that, I'm like, man, I don't know if I like this, but no. In all honesty, the second thing that I think of is like Daniel must have like read The Art of the Deal or Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People or something, because
he was shaking hands and kissing babies.
That's right. I mean, he was a pretty good negotiator.
Yeah.
I mean, to basically, have the confidence in Christ or in God, at that time to make a bold claim and say, hey, we aren't going to eat this meat. And oh, by the way, we're going to eat vegetables, and you're going to check us in 10 days and see how we actually look and how this is working out. I love it. Like the whole thing. I love everything
it was very
about
diplomatic.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was also practical. It wasn't like he just went up and he said, no, we're not going to do this, which, I mean, there probably wouldn't have been anything wrong with that either because, they were being tempted to sin. But he was very practical about it, and he trusted that God was going to give him victory over that. I think
agree.
that's super neat. So later in Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar has this crazy dream, and he tells the wise men of that time that they need to interpret it or they're going to be executed. And rather than panic, Daniel goes to his friends and asks them to pray. In Daniel, I think it is 2:17 and 18, it says, Then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, which that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, his companions, that they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon.
Yeah,
so
that's really good.
He found out that, guys, we might get executed here. Like, let's take this to God and pray, and it said that they would desire mercies of God of heaven concerning the secret.
Yeah.
And so they went to God in prayer, but he took the petition to his friends and he was like, pray with me over this. And so that was another thing with having godly friends is these godly friends prayed together and prayed for one another and prayed for things that mattered.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I mean, for anyone who has needed prayer, I think we all do, and have at some point, in specific needs, it's so great to be able to go to a friend and ask for prayer, go to a church member, whatever, pastor, some friend, and or hopefully a group of friends, and have them pray and just have that comfort, that peace, and know that these are prayer warriors, and
absolutely,
we're gonna shake the throne room of God with these petitions, and it's pretty special. So good friends strengthen your faith. Good friends pray for you in tough times. So those are two great truths.
Yep. And then the other one that we're actually going to talk about is good friends encourage you to do what is right.
Yeah.
So later in Daniel, many of you probably know the story of, the fiery furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where King Nebuchadnezzar sets up this idol of himself. And he's like, whenever the trumpets blow, you all have to bow down. Otherwise, you're going to get thrown into the fiery furnace, right? Well, here's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they decided to take a stand together.
Yep.
And that camaraderie, that just knowing that they weren't alone, I think helped to bolster their faith.
Absolutely.
And helped them to do what was right. It's not saying that they wouldn't have done it on their own, but there is something about having friends who are like, we're going to stand by you, whether we get thrown into the fiery furnace or not.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's, man, that's just the strength that they had it's right in front of them.
Yeah.
Like this big spectacle, even like the peer pressure of the rest of all the group, and that alone you would think would force them to, bow to that idol, let alone the fiery furnace in front of everyone. Right.
Right.
Yeah. And it was so hot that when the guards threw them in, like, I think
The
the guards
guards
perished.
died. Yeah.
So
And then like there's the fourth man walking in the fiery furnace. It was like God actually met them
yeah,
in that fiery trial. It's
yeah,
such a neat story. But I
kind of
loved,
gives you goosebumps.
I know
just
it really
to
does.
envision. Yeah,
Yeah, but when the king was questioning them and he's like, you need to basically conform and do what I want you to do, it
yeah,
says Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. So they used that we, us, our as one mind.
yeah,
And it just reminded me that, good friends do help you do what is right
yeah, absolutely.
and stand together.
Yeah, yeah, and I think kind of. I think this is mostly about some encouraging your children to have good friends and to make good friends and to hang around good friends and good people. But even in your marriage, I mean, like we're best friends,
Yeah.
and we go to each other with these things. And, sometimes it is tough to make decisions as a family or, just individually. And it's like, we have each other's back. And
Yeah.
so if you don't have children, just in marriage or if you're not married, this is ultimately important for all of us.
Absolutely. I am reminded of the quote where it's like you become the sum of the closest 5 people around you,
Yep.
and it just is a reminder again that choosing friends is really important, especially for our kids. And we have to be, as parents, diligent in knowing who our kids are actually hanging out
Yes.
with.
Yep.
We can train them to make wise decisions, but as parents too, I mean, our kids are not always going to make the best decisions. And so we need to be involved and know who our kids' friends are. That's
Absolutely.
not to say that they can't have some friends that they maybe are witnessing to with their actions, but you don't want that person to be their best friend,
I kind of yes, I agree, and what like kind of in my mind, visual in my mind is you have your inner circle of friends where it's like, these are the people that, we kind of live and die together, and we, go to war shoulder to shoulder.
It's your
and
Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel. Yeah.
face whatever, issue. And again, friends change over a lifetime, and in whatnot. But in general, that's your inner circle. It's the people that you're witnessing to. Those are in my mind acquaintances.
Yeah.
They, not that they aren't a friend or you can't be friendly to them, obviously, but they're acquaintances or just people that you are reaching out to.
Yeah.
But
They're
again,
not your confidant. Like you're not telling them like your inner workings,
Yeah, no. If to let someone into your inner circle, I mean that there has to be a lot of trust there.
Absolutely.
And if your children aren't attracting, the right people or gravitating to the right people, again, it might sound bold, but I think that's absolutely grounds to, really work, talk to them and work through it together. And it's not that you're, trying to be, dismissive of, their desires and things like that. It's really protecting them from future letdown, future issues, and, life of unfulfillment. And that goes like, we don't live in a subdivision, but, so it would probably be difficult if you lived in a subdivision and you had, neighbor kids that you don't think are best for your children. Well, invite them over, have them over to your house and, have them in a little more of a controlled environment. Again, reach out to them, minister, things like that. But,
set boundaries.
Yeah. There's a lot of little nuances around this, and each situation is unique, but it's so important to pay attention to and to work on.
Yeah, wasn't it Brandon Turner? Like he's from Bigger Pockets
Yeah,
or whatever.
yep.
I started following him on
not
Instagram.
anymore, but he started there. Yeah.
I started following him on Instagram just because you mentioned him, but he talked about that one time where he said, I would literally move my family before letting my kids have bad friends.
Yep.
And just because he understood the power that friendships can have over the direction of someone's life,
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Which that seems very extreme, but I don't know that he's necessarily wrong depending on the circumstances of it,
Yeah, honestly, I don't think you can overstate this. I mean, it is something that is that important. And I mean, again, especially in some of those formidable years in our lives and, children's lives. But I mean, you're so easily influenced. You are, again, we all want to be accepted in our own way, different things like that. And you can be really persuaded and encouraged to do right, more right, and then it's really easy to be persuaded to do wrong.
Yeah, and you have to know your children and their personalities, because some children do bend towards being more people pleasers, and some maybe are really strong in their faith and they're going to be fine, So it really does just take discernment and wisdom on your part as the parent to know what step you need to take. And I talk about this all the time, but like the Bible says, if we ask for wisdom, God will give us wisdom. And so, we can't just give a pat answer for whatever situation is happening, with your kids' friends. But what I can say is take it to God and seek him and, read his word and what does his word say. And with that, you're going to gain the wisdom that you need to make the right decision.
Yeah. Yep. And again, kind of going back to what you just said, it's not to say that children and us, as individuals can't stand on our own. It's just so much easier and better with, a partner and with a good friend. Kind of along that line, I think we would be remiss to bring up Daniel, at least the first 6 chapters of Daniel, and not mention Daniel in the lion's den, right? And so, I mean, I guess I wasn't I didn't prepare for this comment, but that pretty much was him standing on his own. I mean, I don't think he had any close friends around him that, he stuck with it and
I'm
prayed.
pretty certain he was an old man though when this happened. So he was older and very grounded in his faith at that point.
That's kind of what I was building towards is maybe the friendships that he had as a young man really, created the framework that, throughout life he was able to stand regardless. And, again, who knows? Where this is just kind of speculation, on who he was, and maybe they all would have been, the same. It would have been in the same story with or without the group. But for him to, just I don't really care what they say or what these laws are or whatever. I'm gonna honor my God and pray to my God and serve my God, and then God protected them.
Right. Yeah. I don't think it's by chance that these 4 men or young men were put together in Babylon. God orchestrated that for the purpose of our sanctification, even to this day, reading the story and just gleaning from it and just seeing how faithful God was and how we can purpose in our own lives to stand firm on our beliefs and what our parents have taught us. And as parents, it can teach us to be faithful and diligent in teaching our children the way in which they should go, because clearly, Daniel's parents gave him the path that he should walk. And when he was on his own, he didn't depart from it.
Yeah. Also, my mind kind of wanders to think, there had to have been a bunch of other people there and friends that probably did right, but they weren't really mentioned here, and just kind of what that group looked like. And I don't know, it's kind of fun for me to.
It kind of makes you wonder, why did God choose just these 4 to talk about? You know, like you said, there probably were others who were standing and doing what was right, but.
Yeah, but there were
they're
more that weren't.
Absolutely, they were definitely the minority in this.
Yeah. So like you said, it's kind of. Who knows what this story would have been, in a different light or with different people or whatever. I mean, we might not have even had this podcast. You never know.
This was just this was good fodder for us to kind of chew through as we were, reevaluating, like, where are we at in our parenting? What principles are we teaching our children? What do our kids' friends look like?
Yep.
Like, who are they? What type of influence are they having on them? As homeschooling parents, we do have, I would almost say, a little easier because we do have a little more control with what they are exposed to. If you're going to a public school, it's kind of hard to say, like, yeah, like you don't even know probably half the
Sure.
kids.
Yeah.
But that is where it is so important as parents to be faithful at home so that when your kids do go out, they're making wise decisions. In communication,
Yep.
we've been talking about that a lot too. We talk about that a lot on this podcast between like a husband and wife, but the communication between you and your kids is also really important.
Yeah, you got to know what they're learning, what they're thinking, what they're
Exactly.
doing. And
Like,
yeah.
I ask our son, every now and then, I'm like, who would you say are your best friends? And he'll tell me who he thinks are his best friends. And I'll say, why have you chosen them as your friends? Like,
Yep.
are they good kids? Are they trying to do what is right?
Yep.
And he's like, oh yeah, like, well, they kind of do some stupid stuff sometimes, but they love the Lord and
Right.
whatever. And I'm like, well, that's boys being boys, like there's a
Yeah.
difference between that, but keeping the communication open with our kids and letting them see that we are interested in their lives and we want what's best for them,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so
Yeah. And, we want them to be good friends to other people,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So if they aren't, behaving how they, we don't,
we don't want them to be the friend that parents don't want their
exactly.
kids being friends
Yeah,
with.
that's kind of what I was getting at. Yeah. So, and obviously no one's perfect,
Absolutely not,
but,
no.
at the same token, just kind of, I was thinking as you were talking about homeschool versus public school, we're going to have a problem if the classmates here at home are an issue.
Don't be friends with your brother.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just kidding.
And so, no, I don't want to beat it up too much, but at the same time, I'll kind of recap, the kind of main points. Good friends strengthen your faith. Good friends pray for you in tough times, and good friends encourage you to do what is right. And
Absolutely.
again, there's so many other facets, but that was just kind of a good summary of, kind of what we learned or talked about in Sunday school, and some application to the home and to parenting and, kind of everything in between.
Yeah, like we said on this podcast, we want to make sure that we are presenting you guys with the stuff that we are working through ourselves.
Yeah,
So you
for
hear
sure.
us mentioning like our Sunday school class the past couple episodes, because these are things that we have been talking about as a husband and wife
Yeah.
and parents. And
This is real life.
this is real life for us. And these are the things that we've been, talking through and studying and just allowing God to work in our lives.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah. And I know we said in the previous episodes that we were going to try to talk about either a book or a podcast that we've listened to recently. Do you have anything that you have been, listening to and learning from?
Not in particular that would apply to this. I don't think. I am reading a business book at the moment, and I actually kind of used some of that information in the last podcast. But
Which business book is it?
Well, it's actually Traction. I'm
Okay.
rereading it for at the nth time, but kind of going back through the EOS life. And then there's a bunch of other podcasts that I listen to that I've been having fun listening to, some hunting related ones. As you all have heard, I love hunting and specifically mountain hunting. And right now it's expo season in the hunting industry. So all the different companies are traveling around to, SHOT Show, the Sheep Show.
Sounds expensive.
Yeah, the Western Mountain Hunting Show, expo and stuff like that. So yeah. It's very enjoyable for the gear junkie that I am.
That's awesome.
I don't know, what platform you all are listening on or watching, the YouTube. We have obviously all the Apple Podcasts, is a major platform. Spotify is a place where you can leave comments right in the episode and on the episode. So if you happen to be listening on Spotify, we'd love to see what you're thinking. Leave us a message, drop a note on there, comment. And again, we do have a email address. It's podcast@thisdevotedlife.com. And we would love to hear from you on good, bad, otherwise, what you would love to hear more of, maybe what you would like to hear less of. And we do have pretty big plans for, the upcoming episode, season, whatever you want to call it. But we also want to do what you all want to hear. And, we don't want to overthink it, but at the same time, we don't want to underthink it either.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Well, we'll wrap it up with that. Until next time, we want to encourage you to seek God, love your spouse, hug your kids, and stay devoted. Thank you for tuning in to This Devoted Life podcast with James and Shanda. We appreciate your support in sharing biblical, uplifting truths with the world. If you found value in this episode, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us to improve the show, and we'd love to hear from you. Be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. To learn more about how to live a life devoted to God and family, head over to thisdevotedlife.com. You can also follow me, Shanda, on Instagram at devoted_motherhood.